Dateline with Jane Pauley and Stone Phillips, plus Tom Brokaw, Katie Couric, Bryant Gumbel, and Maria Shriver. From our studios in Los Angeles, here is Maria Shriver.
Good evening. Tonight we begin with the story of a woman who was in trouble, strung out on heroin, hooked on men who sexually abused her, locked in a life of self-hate and despair. But the incredible story of Patrice Gaines actually begins where so many other similar lives have ended. Rahema Ellis has this inspiring story of what a person can do when they're moved by the power of love.
I certainly did things that I wouldn't do now. I shot heroin, I shoplifted, or I stole money to give to a man.
Meet Patrice Gaines, a woman whose long, painful battle with drugs and men brought her near death. She says the difficult lessons she's learned can help anyone who's ever faced despair.
I hated myself. I thought that in this country, being black, that I was nothing. I thought being a woman, I was nothing. And I just thought personally, I was nothing.
Her self-hate led to one especially overwhelming need.
I was desperate to be loved by men. It seemed important for me that they think that I was good and worthy of them.
What would you do?
You do anything that that person would have you to do.
Anything?
Even having sex when you don't want to, or having sex with someone you really wish later that you hadn't. But just because you needed that one moment of approval or of what I really thought was love. I was the perfect victim for men who preyed on women with low self-esteem.
In her new autobiography, Patrice recounts her years of self-hate, rage, and sexual excess.
I would hit rock bottom more than once. I bounced back each time, but I didn't know how to hold on, to keep myself from falling again. I reached some dangerously low points, like the night I was brutally beaten and raped by a man I had dated just over a month.
Softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling.
Patrice barely survived that night, but she went on to turn her life around and become a success. At the age of 45, Patrice Gaines has a prestigious, well-paying job, one that demands talents that few people possess. Patrice's beginnings give no hint of her past turmoil or present success. Her father was a career United States Marine, her mother a homemaker. The oldest of 7 children, she spent her early years on the Marine base at Quantico, Virginia, one of the few places in the South where blacks and whites went to school together, then as they do now.
All my little friends were white. They treated me very special. I always said I was the queen because they acted like they were my subjects, and they wanted to be with me.
She didn't really find out what it meant to be black in the South till she was 10, and her father was reassigned to Beaufort, South Carolina. Patrice and other black children had to go to a segregated school off base.
We used secondhand books that the white students were finished with. I watched the white kids go by in the school bus while we're sitting outside eating lunch, and they'd yell, "Nigger." You know, I just hated those people who went by and called me nigger.
I have a dream today.
In the turbulent 1960s, Patrice's teenage thinking was shaped by civil rights marches and black rage. She and her family moved to a Washington, D.C. suburb. There, her self-destructive relationships with men began. What was it that attracted you to the men in your life?
I was looking for someone who wasn't like my father. My father was strict, very stiff, a real Marine.
And Patrice says her father never showed her any affection. So you looked for men who were the opposite of your dad?
The opposite of my father. And I found a lot of trouble. Guys who lived on the street, who made their living hustling, gambling, robbing, burglarizing.
Outwardly attractive, she was a very unhappy, confused young woman. The year after she graduated, she and Ben got engaged, and she had his child, a daughter, Andrea. But motherhood did not keep Patrice from heroin. She says Ben introduced her to it.
I put my arm out, and then he took the syringe with the heroin in it and shot it in, and then you're high just like that. I mean, by the time the needle comes out, you're somewhere else.
Is that where you wanted to be, somewhere else?
Yeah. I was looking for relief of pain. I wanted a place where I felt safe, where I felt that I could survive, and I didn't feel that I could survive in this world.
Ben was drafted and sent to Vietnam during the war, and then ordered to North Carolina. Patrice and Andrea moved to Charlotte to be near him. On weekends, Patrice, Ben, and friends would do drugs in this Charlotte housing project. And heroin is what you bought.
Right. We'd go in the house and we'd cook it up and we'd shoot it. And then we'd sit around and nod, listen to music. And I did other drugs too.
What other drugs?
A lot of pills, hallucinogenics, LSD, purple haze, mescaline, speed.
In June of 1970, Ben and Patrice went to this arena after shooting heroin to hear a concert by the rock group Steppenwolf. Patrice stayed in her seat. Ben went back to see a friend who was selling marijuana joints to people he thought were concert goers.
I saw him standing with a police officer and with some other guys who were undercover police officers, as it turned out. And they were pointing in my direction. I knew that in my pocketbook, I had the heroin and the works. And so when they started heading towards me, I got up, didn't remember how to get out, jumped over some seats. I ran this way and then just kept running.
She didn't make it. She was arrested for heroin possession and jailed on $100,000 bond.
That was one of the worst times of my life. You know, I loved this girl so much, and I knew right away it had to be Ben, and I was furious.
Her family hurried to Charlotte to visit Patrice in jail. Andrea was 2 years old, too young to go in. So they held her up outside, hoping Patrice might see her baby from a cell window. We took Patrice back to the jail, which is now being demolished for a new one, to revisit and remember.
I'm looking out this very narrow window, and I look out and I see my daughter, and I guess it struck me then that I couldn't touch her. I couldn't even say, look, here I am, here I am, here's Mommy. It probably hurt more than anything ever hurt me in my life.
That moment was the turning point in Patrice Gaines's life, but it was only the beginning of a long, hard struggle. There was one more night in jail for shoplifting, 3 failed marriages, 2 rapes, and an abortion. Eventually, she managed to stop using drugs. Patrice says she found the strength to change mostly because she was determined to make a better life for her daughter. She got a job as a secretary at a newspaper, the Charlotte Observer, and later wrote for the employee newsletter and a consumer column.
I had always liked to write.
Did you notice something about yourself when you were writing?
I felt powerful. I felt better about myself.
Patrice attended a summer program for minority journalists in California. Then she spent 2 years as a reporter for the old Miami News. In 1980, Patrice and Andrea moved back to Washington. Patrice applied for a job with the Washington Post.
Eventually was given a tryout. And then I was hired.
Just that easy?
Well, you could say it was easy, but there was that, writing, studying. I used to go home and study in the evenings, looking at the newspaper, cutting out articles I liked, writing, rewriting them.
But her past came back to haunt her. Although she had pleaded guilty to possessing heroin 15 years before, she had lied about her past on her job application. At one point, it looked like her secret might come out.
I went to the management and I told them what I was facing was losing an income that was paying for my daughter's tuition. She was in college at this time.
Patrice agonized for 3 months while she waited to see if executive editor Ben Bradley would let her stay.
Bradley called me into his office, Ben Bradley, and said that a decision had been reached and that they had decided to keep me. And basically told me, I remember he said it was because I was so damn talented.
Patrice Gaines Clark of the Washington Post.
Talented enough that 2 years ago, she won an award from the National Association of Black Journalists.
I like it up here. What has happened has been a lot of wonderful things, including I got a book contract. In my job as a reporter at the Washington Post, I run into young girls who remind me of my old self. I see them standing in line during visiting hours at the D.C. jail, many of them toting babies on their hips. So this is my ode to those young sisters, those children with womanish ways. I want them to know that no matter how low they fall, they can get back up. No matter how many times they stumble, they can still walk tall.
Patrice's daughter didn't stumble. Andrea graduated from Spelman College. She now has a job with a Hollywood public relations firm. Mother and daughter love to visit and talk on the phone almost every day.
Oh, no, look at me. She had me when she was 19 at a fairly early age, so we've kind of grown up together, learned a lot of the same lessons together. At the same time, I've learned from her mistakes.
Okay, move up, girls. Move up.
Patrice attributes her transformation to love from family and friends, better jobs, self-help books, and psychotherapy, but most of all, to her daughter.
She's the love of my life. I never know when this will happen, but I really do feel that when I was too young to even know, that God sent me an angel and said, well, here's this angel to walk beside you. Regardless of where you go, she will always love you. She'll always be there.
Patrice believes Andrea isn't the only one who's there for her now. Last June, she married for the 4th time. She says her new husband, a warehouse supervisor, is different from all the other men in her life.
I think finally I changed so that I attracted someone who's just a good person, a good, kind person, sincere, patient, loving. Things are just good. They're nice. I'm like those boring people, I guess, that I used to think were just so, just so straight and so boring. That's my life, and it's wonderful.
There's very little chance that Patrice's life will become too boring. She plans on writing more books, continuing lecturing, and hopes one day to become a grandmother.